All right, let's say we're given this linear inequality and we're asked to graph it. Now, from what we discussed, we know there are a couple decisions we're going to have to make, such as what line type we're going to use and which direction to shade. So just remember that when we talked about this last, we looked at the inequality symbol and the y, and that is really what helps us make our decision. So the fact that this is a less than or equal to, the or equal to is what tells us dashed or solid. So in this case, which do we want to use? Well, we're going to use our solid line in this case. And again, that's because of this or equal to piece. Without it, we would have to use a dashed line. Now, what direction should we shade? Well, according to this, it says y is less than our equation. So in that case, when y is less than, I'm thinking smaller, I'm thinking less, I'm thinking below. And so these are the two selections that we would make, and we would be ready to graph. But sometimes it's still difficult for us to make the correct graph because we can easily get confused which side of the graph is considered to be above and which side is considered to be below. So let's just do a quick review on that and we'll finish up this problem. All right, so here we have three graphs, and all they're asking us to determine is which way have these been shaded. So, like I said, sometimes it can be really hard to determine which side is which. So that's why it's worth practicing. Now, if I look at this line, I would say the more flat our line is, the more horizontal it is, the easier it is to kind of tell what's above and below. So in this one, when I see the shading up here, it's fairly easy for me to see, oh, we must have shaded above in this case. And if you have trouble determining that, I think what you could do is just say, okay, well, where do I see the shading, and start at really any point on the line and point towards it. If I point to the shading, I have to point upwards, don't I? And so that means I've shaded above. Okay. This one we're getting a little bit less flat. It's looking a little bit more steep, and so it becomes a little more challenging to tell, did we shade above or below? But again, if I start at any point on this line and I just draw an arrow, so let's say I start here, it doesn't matter, and I draw an arrow pointing to my shaded area, I'm going to have to point downward, right? And so obviously here we've shaded this graph below, right? So here this was a below. And what about this last one? Well, again, this is another weird one. First of all, our lines sometimes are pointing in different directions. So this one's a negative slope where this one was a positive slope. So it can also throw us off in that regard. But again, start at any location on the line and just draw an arrow either pointing up or down. Which way do I have to point my arrow to point towards my shading? Well, in this case, I'd have to point down, right? If I start at any point on my graph and point up, well, that leads me to my non-shaded area. So that's no good, right? So clearly, this is another example where we've shaded below. So now we want to put that into practice a little bit. Let's give that a try. Okay, so here it's asking which way is which. So let's say we've already made the decision whether to shade above or below, and I've graphed in my line, and I'm ready to actually choose which side to shade, right? So let's look at this one, for example. This one, they ask us to shade above the line. So what do we consider to be above the line? Is it area 1 or area 2? And, looking at this line, again, this is a nice line to work with. It's pretty flat, so it's fairly easy for me to see that if this is the line, this must be the above section. But again, I can just take any location on that line, just point upward if I want to go above. And that will lead me here. So this is where I'm going to want to shade in this situation. All right, what about the next one? So again, they ask us to shade above here. Which side of this graph is above? It's really kind of hard to tell, honestly, because this line is pretty steep. But again, start at any location. Maybe I'll start at the y-intercept this time. If I want to shade above, I want to shade up. And so when I draw an arrow going up, it points to the side that we've labeled with a 1. So this is going to be our shaded region in this case. And we have one more here. So this one's still pretty steep, maybe not as steep, but still kind of tricky. Here they've asked us to shade below. So see if you can predict. Do you think side 1 is the below side, or is side 2? And so here I would say side 1 is below. And you can use that same arrow trick that I was talking about. You can see kind of the line is leaning this way. And so the way the line leads is you're below. But, just start anywhere. If I want to go below, I want to go down. And so when I point down, it points to that one side. Okay, so that's really how we make our decision what's above and below. And like I said, sometimes it's a little bit more obvious than other times. But with the arrows, it can be really, really helpful. So let's go back to that problem that we started with and see if we can finish it up. Alrighty, so we're back to this problem. Y is less than or equal to 7/2 x plus 3. And we had already decided we would use a solid line and we would shade below. So of these options, which one is the proper graph for this inequality? Well, start with the line type because that's an easy thing to cross out. We said it's got to be solid, so I'm going to cross out these two graphs that have dashed lines, right? That's no good. That doesn't work for me. So now I'm just down to these two. It's got to be one of these. And we just have to decide which one has been shaded below because we said it's y is less than. So we need to have shaded below. And again, it can be hard to tell because this line's fairly steep. But, if I go ahead and start at any point on my line, I need to go below. So I'll draw my arrow down. This one is shaded on that downward side, whereas to point to my shaded region here, I'd have to point upward from the line. And so this graph has been shaded above, and that's no good. So this is our answer right here. All right, guys, I hope that helps, and give a few extra practice problems a try.